Yeah, my name is Moody Hadi. I'm here with my colleague Rochelle March. We're part of S&P Global Market Intelligence. I'm part of new product development where we do a lot of R&D, that we leverage a lot of data science tool. Rochelle is like a senior product manager in ESG area, which is part of a company we bought called TrueCost. So today I'll kind of kick it off just to give you an idea of what S&P Global does and a little bit behind what these two products that Rochelle built look like. And then, I'll hand off to Rochelle. So S&P Global is really four major business lines. The ratings agency, which basically rates, I don't know if you've seen AAA, CCC, that sort of, they rate large entities, structured products, as well as basically, as well as countries. The indices, so the S&P 500, the Dow Jones are also part of the business line. We're looking at settlement pricing, we're looking at basically performance attribution. Market intelligence, which is a data and analytics company, also part of S&P Global. We basically provide financial data for different institutions, including financial institutions and non-financial institutions. Platts, which is an energy-focused research entity that really does a lot of deep diving on over-the-counter markets and some of the spot markets in crude, natural gas, electricity. So it's really a large conglomerate. We're part of S&P Global Market Intelligence, so we're really focused on trying to deliver to our customers basically insights. So from a product management perspective, we are really focused on our particular domains. We have multiple different domains. If you look at MI, market intelligence in general, we really collect a lot of data, both public, third-party collected, proprietary data that clients share only with us. We have a content layer that basically links that information together, so we can create transparency around entities that we've collected through different sources. And then we have basically what you can think of as the product management teams leveraging insight data mining, whether it's credit risk analytics, investment management, ESG, non-financial corporates, financial institutions. For that, we really work with structural models, machine learning models, a lot of the different data science techniques, robotic process automation to make it more efficient, right? So really like almost the full gamut, the full stack in data science. But our key target is to deliver to our client insights that are quite simplified and to make their workflows more efficient. So with that, we have basically multiple client interfaces, including market intelligence desktop, Excel, API services, and FTP, like feeds. So today we're going to really focus on the green, on the good stuff, environmental, social governance, and finance, and how they intersect. To give a quick overview, just focus on the ESG data factory across the major business lines. We have basically different areas that ESGs are focused on. So in ratings, we have ESG evaluations, green bond evaluations, and in market intelligence, we do sort of research-focused scorecards as well as client service scorecards, which you'll see some examples of those. The ESG indices, we launched the S&P 500 ESG indices recently, green bond indices, and of course in Platts, the energy and commodity side of that, which is kind of more natural. And with that, I will hand it over to Rochelle.
Great, thanks, Moody. So Moody mentioned the term ESG a lot, and that stands for environmental social governance. And I'm here to talk a little bit about that because it's a rapidly rising area of finance, and this is because these traditionally extra financial metrics are becoming very important to the financial community, as well as many different companies and investors. So on this slide, I have two examples of certain ESG issues that do pose real risk to financial returns. So on the left, we have governance risk. A great example is Dieselgate, aka when Volkswagen lied about their emissions and they had a big emission scandal, which then cost them about $30 billion in liability and takebacks. So that was a major issue, which is related to governance, corruption, lack of transparency. The piece to the right is natural disaster risk. I'm sure all of you in Miami are really aware of the rise in severity of different natural disaster storms. And this can pose a real risk in supply chains, operations, as well as distribution channels of products and services. So here's a couple of examples. But more on the opportunity side rather than risk, ESG is kind of going mainstream in the market. And I've been working in this field for quite a long time, and the last year I've just seen a complete turnaround in the interest in this area. Part of this is there's some smart beta and alpha to be gathered. So on this graph to the left, we did a comparison of the S&P 500 to a lot of our other fossil-free and carbon-efficient indices that we make at S&P. And these indices have actually outperformed the S&P 500 in the last 5 years. So now the myth that you need to have environmental performance at the cost of financial return is slowly dissolving. And we're seeing this more and more as there's more standardized data and analysis being done. I recently did an analysis on the S&P 500 on the SDGs, which I'll mention in a moment, that was particularly interesting and shared some of this as well. And part of it, too, is regulation. There's a lot of countries that are really starting to wake up about this, particularly in the form of carbon taxes. There's over 40 regions in the world, including the United States, such as in California and New England, that do have different types of carbon schemes, such as taxes or emission taxes. This graph to the right, you can see that regulations have really skyrocketed more recently and are expected to do so. So there's a lot going on in the ESG world, and I'm really excited, and S&P is also really excited. But as small teams, we're really trying to deliver on this momentum in an efficient and optimized way. So today I'm going to talk about two tools that we've built. One is a more internal tool that optimizes efficiency on the team side that we then deliver to clients, the SDG evaluation tool. And then I'll also show you a client-facing dashboard that we built in our Shiny that is something that clients will use directly. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the SDGs. These are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These were launched in 2015 to replace the Millennium Development Goals. And they essentially articulate a better world by 2030, lessened maternal mortality, reduced emissions, more transparency in government institutions. But unlike most UN initiatives, the private sector was heavily involved in their development. So now a lot of companies feel an obligation to communicate how they're going to contribute to the SDGs. However, to date, there really hasn't been a standardized quantitative way to measure this, which is where we come in. So we wanted to develop a tool that was completely data-driven, could provide a standardized quantitative way to measure this performance over time. So I'll talk a little bit more about the technicalities, but what you see here is a breakdown of different SDG risk across the different value chain stages. So we're looking at indirect suppliers, so that's even down to the mines and the fields where you're getting the raw materials and extraction, to direct suppliers, maybe those suppliers a company is directly operating with, operations, and then downstream, which is kind of into life or the lifetime of a product and service in the consumer stage. So this is very unusual. You don't usually see products that can look at the full value chain. And we used a lot of modeling approaches and exploratory data analysis in order to create this. The general concept behind this is that companies are operating in different sectors and geographies that have inherent risk. So a mining company in Afghanistan is going to have lots of different ESG risks compared to a financial company in France, for example. We're going to talk about, larger workplace accidents, maybe forced labor, definitely pollution. Financial services is going to have a really low carbon footprint, for example, and there's going to be a lot of regulation around that. So that's that SDG risk, and then we want to see how well a company is mitigating that risk, which they may communicate through disclosure or different data about the company, as well as positive risk, which may be the different revenue they're generating from products and services, as well as other ways companies contribute to society, such as employment, economic growth, and philanthropy. So that's the general concept of the tool. And the risk exposure is really the most complex piece. I'll spend a couple minutes on the technical piece here. And it's essentially built on what's called a multi-regional input-output model. And this is a traditional economic approach that looks essentially at the imports and exports of a lot of different countries and a lot of different sectors. So the model we're using is actually 189 countries with 26 sectors each, so quite a large matrix. And then we are extending that matrix by 45 different ESG or SDG related metrics. This runs the gamut from, child labor risk, water pollution, communicable disease risk, so many different things. But also the SDGs that I described earlier really describe a broad swath of issues that we want to look into. So essentially, we're building this. I converted these matrices into a dictionary that you can then multiply the different metrics by very simply. And then to find a company risk, we look at the intensity of that company in different sectors and geographies, and essentially compare it to the worst actor in different sectors and geographies to derive a percentile rank that essentially gives us a relative magnitude of its risk. Here's some sensitivity analysis we did, and you can see that we are getting different results in the same country across different sectors, as well as in the same sector in different countries. So that was really interesting to see, and so you can really get a sense of how companies are essentially contributing or detracting from achieving the SDGs by that time frame of 2030. So that's a bit about our tool. It's a quantitative data-driven tool. We did a lot of model building and EDA in Python and R. And then one thing that I will show now is a nice tool we used to make the workflow much more seamless internally. So TrueCost is the company that was acquired by S&P a couple years ago. We specialize in ESG analysis and analytics, but I will say it's a little Excel-based, and Excel does have its limitations. So we decided to build kind of a UI online tool to show the workflow of this, which otherwise would be done on, say, 10 different Excel workbooks because there's so much going on. So an analyst would come and enter the information, client name, sector, save the date so you have a timestamp of the piece you're working on. And then we would go through the different steps of the report generation. The exposure is the model I just explained right now. And so what's nice is we put all of the Python code in the back end here, so it just runs automatically in a couple of seconds, which is great. We want to look at the mitigation to the exposure risk. So this is this piece. And essentially, the analyst would click on this link to scorecard that would go to an online scorecard where they'd go through the different scoring mechanisms to derive the mitigation. Same with positive impact. We would save all the information. And then finally, we would upload that into our final analysis. When the report's ready, we would generate the report and go to the archive. And so this is really nice too. It saves all of the different pieces for quality assurance, and then we're ready to check it out. So a lot of the value too is, so this too, we used to have to copy and paste everything from Excel into a PowerPoint, and now it's beautifully automatically generated. I'm really excited about this. And what's nice too is there's a lot of areas where you can go and change the commentary and save it directly on here, so it's really seamless. So this is, what a report would look like. There's a lot of information. And what's nice too is, these are done with Plotly graphs, so you can have some interactivity, check it out. This is particularly useful with some of these graphs a little more detailed. Here we have a peer analysis. So another thing that's nice about this is you can compare the scores across different sectors, size of companies, geographies, and over time, which is really nice. Different matrices, again, we've got the hover, which is really helpful, and so on. So this was really a great thing that we have internally to kind of quicken our internal workflow and then also deliver a really nice quality product. And then in the last couple of minutes before I open up to questions, I'll just show you our dashboard. So this is an external facing piece that companies would log on to in the market intelligence platform and use it for their own data and work. So here we're looking at Abbott Laboratories, and you can see their ESG score, the different pieces of environmental, social, and governance. You can look for different reporting years, and then here we have all of the different components for ESG. Energy management, waste management, access to healthcare, kind of gives you a snapshot of all the ESG issues that they're looking at, and also governance. And so one thing too that you can do is filter, check it out. If you want to compare against peers, also some nice plotly graphs that you can get closer in, and so on. You can also look over time, year on year, which is really interesting now that there's enough data to actually do this, and kind of see how things are performing over time. And finally, and then if we use a lot of data acquisition and modeling to fill data gaps and to present data on these companies. But let's say it was your own company and you said, these carbon emissions are definitely not this number, it's a different number. You can actually override it and it will show you the scoring. Or if you want to stress test, what if we acquired a bunch of new buildings, they're going to have more emissions, how will this affect our score? You could see what that would look like here. And then the final piece is just a portfolio tool. So a lot of the products we develop are on the corporate level, but then also we extend them to the portfolio level for asset managers and banks and things like that. And so here's a couple of pre-populated portfolios, and you can see the overall aggregate score and then the ESG scores among the different actors. So I hope that you learned a bit today about ESG, also what S&P and TrueCost is up to, and hopefully maybe got some ideas of other tools and products that you might want to implement in your organizations as well. So thank you so much today, and happy to open up to any questions. Yeah.
All right, we have our first question through Slack. Carlos asked, did you consider using an off-the-shelf BI tool like Tableau or Power BI instead of a custom-built dashboard?
We did, yes. We did a lot of exploratory looking at lots of tools, and we just wanted something that was really custom and could provide really nice quality outputs. Not that Tableau or Power BI won't. We do actually use Power BI for a lot of internal data analysis because it is so Excel friendly. But we just really like the interactivity of Dash and how well it could be used to build something very seamless.
You guys remember we're only taking questions via Slack. So please make sure that you join the Slack channel and type them in, and I'll read them for you in the back of the room. If there's no more questions, though, we can always follow up with our speakers after the fact. I know that Moody and Rochelle are going to be here all day long, so make sure to see them during the breaks. Last chance for questions on Slack.
Sure. Yeah.
So my question for everyone on the stream is, does the scoring tool correlate with market gains if you're trading actively?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a really good question because although ESG issues can affect market gains and market gains can affect ESG issues, they're not always combined. And so we often think of ESG as extra financial information that often is a really good proxy of good management of a company. If companies can address these issues, mitigate them, and report on them, it's often a more agile and resilient company. But no, we're not going to, these scores would not be affected by market gain. These are totally separate and are showing, performance on these different metrics like emissions and things like that. Fun fact, historically, major problems like the BP oil spill or Monsanto's controversy or, Nike child labor have resulted in pretty bad dips in stock market prices, but those dips do not remain for a really long time. Generally, the price does go back up. So we do look at the financial materiality of a lot of the metrics themselves. So a lot of the metrics that you'll see here do have some evidence of financial correlation. But hopefully as more data emerges and we're able to do more tests, we can tie that relationship together even more closely. So thanks for your question.
Okay, that seems to be it. Thanks so much, you guys. We really appreciate it.